going over common topics in divorce along with COBRA. I'm Danielle Britt, the marketing here at Cosmo, and I will be interviewing our professionals. Here is Mark Herschlag, CEO of Cosmo Insurance Agency, also our employee benefits broker, and here's our special guest attorney, Adam Berner from Berner Law and Mediation Group. Thanks for joining us, and let's get right into the discussion.
Get into it.
As a lawyer who specializes in divorce, do you experience insurance brought up often?
Do I experience what? Sorry?
Insurance brought up often.
Yeah, every single case. Health insurance is such a concern. It's such an expense. Especially when one spouse is sick. It's very much, a concern for all parties, and especially when they're working together, not looking to kind of kill each other in court. They're very mindful of, figuring out the best solution.
Really nice. And when it does come to health insurance, which is a huge household expense, how does COBRA work, Mark?
So obviously COBRA is like Adam just mentioned, how it's a really important, the health insurance is really like one of the number one things when it comes to divorce. And there is COBRA, obviously, that's offered, and it must be offered. So COBRA is definitely an option there. And not only is it an option, it must be implemented, right, Adam? So that it's got to be implemented at the divorce. If not, there is consequences with that.
Yeah, unless the non-covered spouse has another way of getting coverage. Often COBRA is expensive, and if they're working at a job maybe with not as good of benefits, so they kind of relied on the other spouse, but in light of the cost of COBRA, they might just rely on the non-covered spouse employment.
But they can't, like, for example, let's say like the plan is $1,000 deductible. They can't go and say, okay, now I'm going to throw you a plan that's a $10,000 deductible. You can't do that either.
Yeah.
So basically, it's just a big conversation for both parties to have. Hopefully, they're both on the same page, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mark, are there limits as to what COBRA could be, could charge, what the health insurance company could charge for COBRA? Is that like mandated by the state, or?
Yeah, so it's 102%. So let's say, for example, the premium is $400, it could be $402. So the COBRA can charge an additional 2% above whatever it is. That's the allowed amount.
Got it.
Interesting. Next question. Health insurance coverage compared to divorce.
So technically speaking, divorce is the trigger where a non-employed spouse, or the one who's not covered through employment, would lose the coverage. The question is, let's say if it's not divorce, is separation enough of a trigger? And frankly, this is a cause for many couples who, especially when they're trying to work together in their divorce, they agree to hold off on the divorce. Kind of like when you go get your PhD, you get the ABD. Someone has all but the dissertation. So a divorcing couple could do everything, get an agreement, and then do ABD, all but the divorce itself, to avoid the loss of health insurance. The thing that I understand, though, is while most health insurances are okay with that, some are starting to kind of wise up and are actually including in their policy that a separation could be a trigger to end the coverage. And this is tricky because different states have different laws about divorce. And a lot of states don't even have a status of a separation. New Jersey in particular, there's no legal status of a separation. New York does have a separation, one that just by signing a separation agreement, a couple could be separated. Other states require a judge to sign off on a separation. So there's a lot of ambiguity what exactly a separation means. And we would rely on experts like Mark and his team to go back into the policy to see if separation is a trigger or just the divorce is what to be concerned about.
Right, and it's actually, like, for example, there is a qualifying life event. So if someone's looking to get an individual policy, like Adam, you just mentioned a minute ago, how that sometimes they could get even a more of affordable plan or even a better plan out there on the open market. Divorce is a qualifying life event. So they can't just only rely on COBRA. There are so many other options that they could go out there to the market that a divorce triggers a qualifying event, just like marriage triggers a qualifying event. Same thing, divorce going out is a qualifying life event, and it allows them, they have up to 60 days from the date of divorce to buy their own health insurance policy on the open market out there. So that's a qualifying life event.
And Mark, you were saying that separation is not a life qualifying event, but it could trigger in some policies that the coverage would have to end.
So it could trigger, yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Adam and Mark, is there a way of avoiding loss of health insurance for non-employed spouse upon divorce?
Yeah. Mark, I guess this is, more your bandwidth.
What's that
but
question again? If
certainly,
what?
Is there a way of avoiding loss of health insurance for non-employed spouse upon coverage
So
or
for
upon
example,
divorce?
yeah. So for the non-employed spouse, so for example, let's say if he lost his job, that he's not employed anymore, so then the spouse cannot go and get COBRA. But if he was employed and they were divorced at the employment, so if they were divorced already at the employment, then the spouse itself could get COBRA on her own, meaning she does not have to be connected with with him in order to get the COBRA, or her in order to get the COBRA. So she could go and get it on her own, the COBRA, with her and the kid as a parent-children policy. It does not have to be together a joint policy.
Mark, if you don't mind me asking, so if she, at the point of divorce, the husband's employed, so she would get COBRA, it will last for 36 months. And what happens if then a week later, the husband gets terminated? Then the wife could still stay on the 36-month COBRA and the husband only gets 18 months of COBRA?
The husband will get 18 months, and then the wife will get the 36 months. That's how it works. So the wife gets the 36 months.
Interesting.
So, and let's say, for example, the divorce occurred during COBRA, and they're at their 17th month, and that will allow another 18 months after that.
Really?
So the COBRA will be extended.
Uh-huh. All right. Adam, how do you help couples get divorced that is different than the typical divorce lawyer?
Yeah, so very different in the sense that the way we train in law school is how to win, how to be successful. You want to get the best deal for your client and the worst deal for the other client. The way I approach divorce, it's not that zero-sum win-lose adversarial approach, but rather the question is how can we address the needs and concerns of all family members as much as possible? So it's really framing the divorce as like, let's try to figure this out together. Instead of seeing each other as enemies, as adversaries, let's try to, identify what's important to us, to our kids, and let's figure this out together. The law is the same. Let's be informed of the law, but let's problem solve instead of, problem create. And there are different ways of doing that. There's mediation, there's collaborative divorce, and my firm specializes in not going to court. We don't litigate. We do not feel that courtroom is a place for families to resolve their differences.
Interesting. And also, what exactly is mediation?
So mediation is where we would sit down with the parties together as a neutral, helping identify what the topics are that they have to address, inform them of the law, and help them have a productive conversation, do some perspective taking, giving them a safe place to help them figure this out together instead of against each other. So it's where we're serving as a neutral, not as a judge, because a judge imposes decisions upon the family, but we're helping the parties make their own decisions.
Interesting.
It's so interesting, Adam. How do you keep them out of court? Like you mentioned that trying to keep them out of court. Isn't it something that, I mean, it could end up in court, obviously, but like, how do you keep them out?
Well, if you statistically, 99% of all cases in New Jersey get resolved without a judge making a decision. So it's a statistical anomaly to, expect that you're actually go to the, litigation till the very end where a judge is making a decision. So if that's likely to be the end result, why are we going to just start fighting knowing that we're going to eventually need to reach an agreement? And if you look at the cost of going to court, not just financial costs, but the emotional costs, the impact of work, having to miss work to go to, to court appearances, And the impact on the family. Most people who are kind of adult about things, and are prepared to kind of take the responsibility and say, listen, we're better off figuring this out together. We don't need some stranger in a black robe making a decision for us. So let's just try to work this out on our own with the help of professionals who help us work it out on our own.
That's a
Interesting.
huge specialty on its own. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you also practice collaborative divorce. What does that mean, and how is it different from mediation?
Yeah, so collaborative divorce, so each side, as opposed to going to a neutral mediator, in collaborative divorce, each side goes to their own attorney. So it's similar to more the traditional attorney to attorney model, but these attorneys are specifically trained not only in mediation, but in working together as a team in this collaborative divorce model. So the attorneys actually commit in an agreement, in a contract, that we're not going to go to court. If you want to go to court, client, you're welcome. Get yourself a different attorney, but I'm here to represent you, to advocate for you, but not in an adversarial way. Again, to do it in a way together, to be mindful of the other side, the other person's needs, to be, watch out what's best for the kids, to try to figure this out together. It's a different kind of way in which an attorney is operating, not just for one side in a zero-sum win-lose way, but mindful of the larger picture and family.
That's really progressive. And how can these non-adversarial ways of getting a divorce lead to better resolutions for the families?
Yeah, I mean, so we could talk about this for hours. I know we only have minutes, but by making the commitment of not going to court, it creates a safer environment, a safer place where we can try to problem solve and better understand what's important. Not the parties are not defensive. They're open to the expectation of sharing information instead of fighting to get access to information. And instead of focusing on negotiating the positions, right? If someone says, 0 and the other says 100, 25, 75, 50 deal, instead of just getting stuck in the positions and what each side wants, we really try to go underneath and find out what the needs are for both sides and see if we can work together to address and satisfy those needs. So that's on one foot. That's a brief explanation.
I love that. And also, what happens if there's a financial change in the household during the divorce and the plan can no longer be afforded? Are there punitive actions at all?
Well, it's if someone unilaterally just stops paying support, then for sure, there's default proceedings and is breach of the contract. And but I would hope if someone is in that situation where they lost their job, as an example, the agreement should provide, and the law does provide, that you make an application, in light of the change of circumstances, to reassess what support should be. Is it temporary? Is it long term? So, and any responsible prepared agreement should factor in these kind of contingencies to address them when and if they come up in a fair way.
Uh-huh. All right. And Mark, is COBRA always legally required?
Yes, definitely. It is legally required. In fact, I remember years ago, there was somebody that just, didn't even notify us that there was a divorce going on. And then unfortunately, a few months later, and not only that, he actually put his wife onto like the worst plan out there, his ex-wife, I'm sorry, onto the worst plan out there just to take advantage of it. And then a few months later, he was in court because his ex-wife was coming after him. You didn't offer me COBRA. You just put me on this bronze plan or whatever bronze plan it was, and you didn't offer me COBRA, which he was supposed to offer COBRA. So it is legally required. COBRA must be offered, so it's legally required.
And how long does COBRA last?
So COBRA is generally 18 months, but of course for divorce, which we're discussing today, it's 36 months.
Mark,
Interesting.
when and I think I'm looking at the other question we spoke about. I think we already addressed. But Mark, once a couple is divorced, is there a minimum? Is there a maximum amount of time that the insurance company has to be notified about the divorce? Could it be that if too much time passes, it's too late? How does that work?
60 days is COBRA, so it's usually up to 60 days. But of course, we could go through exception by exception, case by case basis.
It's interesting, in New York, you might not get notice about the divorce until it could be months after, because you have to wait till it gets entered. So I always wondered how that works. It sounds like exceptions can be made.
Yeah, and then obviously we have to show, it's always you have to show proof of divorce for any of these situations. So if it's like, you want to get that 36 month, you got to show proof of divorce for that.
And let's say you're notified for divorce after it happens, would you be able to install a plan retroactively?
Yeah, of course, everything goes retroactively.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And if you guys have any questions for our viewers, please don't hesitate to reach out and comment below, and we'll get right back to you with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniela. Of course, it is in honor of National Ex-Spouse Day. That's really what this is all about, this podcast. And thank you, Adam, for taking time off your busy schedule. I know you're extremely busy, and I really appreciate you joining us today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Danielle.